Carlos Alcaraz was supposed to be the absolute king of the new tennis era in 2026. We all saw the perfect script laid out right in front of him. But instead of lifting trophies on Championship Sunday, we are seeing off-court images that are slowly eating away at his ATP ranking. Just a couple of years ago, he was the youngest male player in history to reach world number 1 with a speed that absolutely terrified the rest of the tour. He was a pure, unstoppable force of nature. Think back to those magical breakthrough moments. We saw a hungry kid dripping in sweat, grinding through brutal 5-set matches with a relentless and infectious smile. He was the ultimate fighter who only cared about chasing down every single ball until his legs gave out. Now look at the recent headlines splashing across your social media feeds. Exclusive Fashion Week appearances in Milan, red carpet galas in Paris, late-night sponsor events where he looks significantly more like a Hollywood celebrity than a professional athlete preparing for a major. The visual contrast is absolutely jarring. You have to honestly ask yourself if the glamour outside the court is actually killing the career of the man we called the next Nadal. It is incredibly easy to look at the flashy new lifestyle and simply assume he just lost his deep hunger for the game. We have seen this exact story play out so many times before with young prodigies who get way too much money and attention way too fast. They win a few majors early on, and then slowly fade into the comfortable background of celebrity life. But before you completely blame the fame and the money for his sudden downfall, you really need to know something very important. There is a deeply hidden secret behind this new lifestyle that tennis insiders and experts have just recently uncovered. And the truth of the matter is much worse than you think. To properly understand the sheer magnitude of this problem, we first have to look at what Alcaraz is actually throwing away right now. For the casual fans who maybe only tune in for the finals of the major tournaments, you need to remember the monumental legacy he has already built at such a young age. He did not just win tennis matches. He completely conquered the grass at Wimbledon against Novak Djokovic in a historic match that felt like a true changing of the guard. He absolutely dominated the hard courts at the US Open to capture his first slam in spectacular fashion. He brought a raw level of electricity and unbelievable athleticism to the sport that we had not witnessed since the absolute peak of the Big Three era. He was supposed to be the chosen one to carry the sport of tennis for the next decade. But the 2026 ATP ranking tells a very different and very terrifying story today. The cold, hard numbers simply do not lie. Alcaraz is currently defending thousands of ranking points from his previous dominant seasons, and he is bleeding them incredibly fast. He is dropping massive points at the Masters events where he used to be utterly invincible. Meanwhile, his biggest rival Jannik Sinner is rapidly pulling away at the top of the standings. The gap in points is widening every single week. Sinner is hyper-focused purely on tennis. Sinner is winning titles consistently. Alcaraz is slipping down the ladder and looking exhausted doing it. Now try to put yourself in his shoes for just 1 second. Imagine being in your early 20s with the staggering weight of an entire nation resting heavily on your shoulders. You are no longer just a tennis player swinging a racket on clay. You are a massive global corporation. You have multi-million-dollar contracts with luxury fashion brands demanding huge chunks of your free time. You have national expectations begging for a new Spanish hero to immediately replace Rafa. The sheer financial and psychological pressure of being a global superstar at that undeniably young age is completely crushing. We sitting comfortably at home demand these athletes to be perfect robots who only train and eat and sleep. We entirely forget the crushing reality of carrying a billion-dollar industry on your back before your frontal lobe is even fully developed. You start to realize that maybe he is not just partying for fun or acting out. Maybe he is actually suffocating under the weight of his own success. If you are finding yourself feeling bad for the kid right now, you are finally starting to see the real picture. If you want to truly understand the dark side of modern tennis, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the truth we are about to uncover. Because the immense pressure of the tour is one thing, but the specific way Alcaraz is choosing to cope with it in 2026 is pushing him into a much more dangerous trap. The cracks began to show not in the missed forehands on the court, but in what happened 48 hours before the most crucial matches of the season. Let us rewind the tape just a little bit to the recent Masters events where the first real alarm started sounding loud and clear. Picture the chaotic scene in Miami or the intense suffocating atmosphere at Indian Wells. These are massive tournaments that require absolute physical perfection and zero mental distractions to survive the brutal hard courts. Instead of resting in an ice bath or quietly visualizing the upcoming draw, Alcaraz was repeatedly spotted, fulfilling utterly exhausting contractual obligations deep into the night. We saw him sitting front row at high-profile runway shows looking completely drained under the flashing lights. We saw him smiling through mandatory corporate sponsor dinners right before tournament week officially kicked off. This is not just harmless fun for a young guy letting off steam. It is a massive, catastrophic drain on the deep mental focus required to win at the absolute highest level of professional tennis. And we saw the devastating direct consequences on the court almost immediately. He suffered those shocking early-round exits that left the entire tennis world completely speechless and scrambling for any logical answers. Look closely at the broadcast tape from those exact matches. The unforced errors were piling up at an alarming rate off both wings. His explosive footwork, the very weapon that makes him so incredibly dangerous against robotic baseline players, looked inexplicably heavy and sluggish. When those tough matches inevitably got dragged into a grueling third set, he simply ran out of gas. The legendary physical stamina that won him epic 5-set battles in New York and London just vanished into thin air, leaving him completely exposed. Tennis experts and former touring pros immediately started raising massive red flags on television broadcasts and deep dive podcasts. Whispers in the crowded locker room and anonymous quotes scattered throughout the international sports press all pointed to the exact same terrifying conclusion. They bluntly said the kid is heavily distracted by the fame. They said he is letting the flashy, expensive lifestyle get to his head, and he is rapidly losing the raw animal hunger that got him to the top of the mountain in the first place. It is incredibly painful to sit there and watch a once-in-a-generation talent struggle to keep a basic baseline rally going because his mind is clearly somewhere else entirely. The tension among his dedicated, loyal fans reached an absolute boiling point online. Everyone started asking the exact same burning question: where is Juan Carlos Ferrero in all of this mess? His legendary coach is the incredibly demanding man who built this champion from the ground up since he was just a skinny teenager. Ferrero is famously known for his absolute strictness and old-school brutal discipline. So how could he possibly stand by quietly and watch his star pupil throw away a critical ATP season for fashion shows and red carpets? The complete agonizing silence from his coaching camp was deafening. Every single time Alcaraz stepped onto the stadium court looking lethargic and slow, the panic among his supporters grew exponentially. The mainstream media narrative was fully set in stone almost overnight. The press quickly labeled him as just another young star who got way too rich, way too fast, and suddenly stopped putting in the lonely, exhausting hours at the empty gym. We felt like we were watching a tragic train wreck happening in slow motion, and nobody had the power to hit the brakes. Everything looks exactly like the classic worn-out script of a sports prodigy falling from grace because of the blinding spotlight. But when you dig deeply into his actual private schedule, experts discovered we have completely misunderstood the root of the entire problem. This is where things get genuinely dark and extremely complicated. What the sports media lazily calls undisciplined partying is actually a desperate psychological survival mechanism, hiding a much more terrifying truth about the money-making machine called Carlos Alcaraz. We have to completely reframe how we look at those glamorous social media photos and late-night corporate events. He is not choosing to stay out late because he lacks discipline or suddenly wants to be an international playboy. He is desperately trying to escape an unbearable and crushing reality that he never fully asked for. The sheer staggering volume of his off-court commitments is not an accident or poor time management. It is a carefully engineered master schedule systematically designed by a massive corporate team that clearly views him as a lucrative commercial product first and a human athlete second. When a young tennis player signs those astronomical mega deals with luxury watchmakers and global fashion, houses the fine print, strictly demands his physical presence at all times, regardless of how tired he feels. The management team and the massive corporate sponsors are the ones actually forcing him to maintain this impossible, flawless, global superstar image. They are aggressively squeezing every single ounce of marketability out of his young body, while he is currently famous and highly relevant. This relentless and unforgiving corporate pressure is completely draining the one essential thing he desperately needs to survive against monsters like Sinner on the grueling ATP Tour. He desperately needs profound recovery energy to heal his broken body. Does this shocking perspective change how you view his recent heartbreaking tournament losses? I really want to know if you think a young player can successfully fight back against their own powerful management team, so drop your honest thoughts in the comments below right now, because this is a massive systemic problem for the entire future of the sport. He is absolutely no longer functioning as a professional tennis player trying to win Grand Slams. He is being ruthlessly operated like a traveling mobile entertainment franchise. A normal professional tennis player rests peacefully after a grueling match to let their torn muscles heal and their exhausted mind reset for the next brutal battle. A mobile entertainment franchise gets quickly shoved onto a private jet to shoot a high-fashion commercial in another time zone before the sweat is even dry on his match shirt. The severe burnout he is currently experiencing is not just normal physical fatigue that can be magically fixed with 8 hours of sleep. It is a profound and deep psychological exhaustion that slowly destroys the fighting soul of a natural-born competitor. When your entire daily existence is monetized for corporate profit and your only free time is spent smiling forcibly for flashing cameras, you eventually hit a massive, unbreakable brick wall. The late-night social life that the sports media loves to heavily criticize is highly likely his only pathetic attempt to silently reclaim a tiny sliver of his own stolen youth. It is a frantic and highly unhealthy way to cope with a suffocating daily schedule that leaves absolutely no room for just being a normal 20-something guy trying to figure out life. He is completely trapped in a beautiful, shiny golden cage built entirely by the very people who are supposed to protect his long-term career. The powerful people who stand to profit the most from his immense fame are the exact same ones driving him straight into the absolute ground. If you think this is just some crazy tennis conspiracy theory, you need to look closely at his physical data and travel logs from the last 6 months. The cold, hard numbers completely validate this dark reality, and they simply do not lie to us. When you place Alcaraz's exhausting 2026 commercial travel schedule right next to the peak playing years of the legendary Big Three, the brutal truth emerges with terrifying clarity. Look at how incredibly protected Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal were during their absolute prime dominant seasons on the tour. Their brilliant management teams fiercely guarded their precious recovery time like an impenetrable fortress. They carefully selected very specific elite tournaments to peak at exactly the right physical moment. They ruthlessly and completely shut out any unnecessary noisy media distractions during critical intense training blocks. They fully understood that winning Grand Slams and maintaining the #1 ranking was the only thing that actually generated true long-lasting legacy and ultimate wealth. Now violently contrast that elite strategic protection with the absolute circus surrounding Alcaraz right now in the current season. His chaotic flight logs show him frantically ping-ponging back and forth across multiple oceans between draining, mandatory press junkets and massive corporate sponsor shoots mere days before major demanding Masters events begin. He is logging significantly more frequent flyer miles for exhausting corporate branding obligations than for actual productive tennis preparation. The profound biological and physical analysis from top sports science experts makes the situation look even more incredibly grim. That severe lack of crucial, uninterrupted recovery time directly leads to exactly what we are seeing happen to him live on the court today. It creates these seemingly random nagging micro-injuries that constantly disrupt his momentum and training flow. His massive team is forcing a highly explosive, high-performance sports car to violently redline its powerful engine every single day without ever pausing for necessary maintenance. You can literally see him losing his most devastating lethal weapon right before our very eyes. He is suddenly losing that terrifying explosive burst of speed that used to make him completely untouchable on a slow, dusty clay court. He cannot physically recover fast enough to maintain that extreme high-octane explosive playing style that made him a global sensation in the first place. If you are a truly loyal, dedicated fan who pays extremely close attention to the tiny details during a tense match, you have probably noticed this subtle but incredibly telling shift in the player's box. The next time you watch him play a tight, crucial match, pay very close attention to the subtle body language of his coach, Juan Carlos Ferrero, sitting in the stands. Ferrero is typically a very animated and intensely vocal presence. But recently, when Alcaraz desperately looks up at the box, after making a completely exhausted, unforced error, Ferrero sometimes breaks eye contact. You can clearly see the agonizing pain and sheer helplessness in the coach's face. It is the deeply frustrated look of a brilliant tennis mastermind who knows exactly how to fix the broken tactical problem, but is utterly powerless to fight back against the massive corporate commercial forces, dictating his players' chaotic life off the court. Ferrero knows the grueling physical toll this insane schedule is taking, but he cannot physically stop the massive sponsor machine from completely devouring his young, talented pupil. The coach is painfully watching his perfect creation slowly unravel and fall apart. So the biggest burning question right now is obvious. With the 2026 ranking currently sitting in a state of absolute red alert emergency, can Alcaraz violently break these heavy corporate chains before it is far too late to save his career? The future of Carlos Alcaraz is currently standing at the most brutal and unforgiving crossroads of his entire young life. The situation demands a brutal and completely honest assessment of his current reality. This punishing, chaotic lifestyle and completely overloaded schedule will absolutely destroy his ability to reclaim the world #1 ranking in 2026. The devastating consequences are practically guaranteed if a massive structural change does not happen immediately within his inner circle. He urgently needs a complete and total house cleaning of his current management structure. He has to completely shut down the relentless commercial noise and forcefully take back control of his own life and physical recovery schedule. He cannot continue to endlessly please his hungry, demanding sponsors while passively watching highly disciplined, hungry rivals like Jannik Sinner or Holger Rune gleefully steal away his rightful ATP crown. But this is not just an isolated tragic story about one wildly talented young player making a few bad scheduling choices. This represents a massive universal problem currently facing the entire complex modern tennis landscape. How does the sport effectively balance the intense, brutal physical demands of being an elite Grand Slam champion with the modern, crushing expectation of also being an omnipresent global pop culture icon? We are slowly watching the sport demand absolutely everything from these incredibly young athletes until they completely burn out and break down mentally. The tour is constantly searching for the next massive global superstar to aggressively market and sell tickets, but they might be actively destroying him in the painful process. The harsh reality is that a painful choice must be made incredibly soon. You simply cannot be both the absolute best tennis player on the entire planet and the most visible corporate billboard in the world at the exact same time. The physical body simply cannot survive that level of extreme punishment and constant pressure. So what do you honestly think about this entire mess? Does Alcaraz actually have the profound mental toughness and raw courage right now to fire the powerful people, making him incredibly rich, so he can finally find that terrifying clay court monster hiding inside him again? Drop your honest opinions down in the comment section below, because this fierce debate is just getting started. And make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because we will be tracking his next massive move very closely, and you will not want to miss what happens next.